Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Sighs. All right, let me tell you something that happened a few months ago. Honestly, even now, it feels a bit surreal. It all started with boxes. Mountains and mountains of cardboard boxes. My husband, Tom, God love him, is a collector. A collector of, well, everything. Books, vintage tools, vinyl records, you name it, he probably has a dusty box of it somewhere. We were moving from our 3-bedroom house in the suburbs to a smaller place downtown. Downsizing, they call it. I call it liberation, mostly from the sheer volume of Tom's treasures. Now, Tom's a strong guy, but he's not getting any younger. And neither am I, for that matter. Well, let's just say I've seen a few decades. Early 50s and feeling every single one of them during this move. We'd been packing for weeks, surrounded by a sea of newspaper and packing tape, but the actual moving part, that was looming. That's where Mark comes in. Mark is Tom's best friend, practically a brother. They've known each other since they were kids, causing trouble down by the creek and getting into all sorts of teenage shenanigans. Mark's a good man. A solid, reliable, salt-of-the-earth kind of guy. He's a widower, been on his own for a few years now since his wife, Sarah, passed. I'd always liked Sarah. We used to go antiquing together. Anyway, Tom, bless his heart, knows his limits. He knew he couldn't handle the heavy lifting alone, and he didn't want to burden me too much. So he asked Mark to help. The morning of the move dawned bright and sunny, almost mocking the stress I felt coiled tight in my stomach. Tom was buzzing around, directing operations like a general, while I tried to keep the coffee flowing and the movers from tripping over the endless boxes. Mark arrived a little later, his pickup truck gleaming in the sunlight. He was wearing a faded blue t-shirt, jeans, and his usual worn work boots. He had this easygoing smile that always put people at ease. "Morning, folks," he boomed, his voice warm and familiar. "Ready to tackle this mountain?" Tom clapped him on the back. "Couldn't have done it without you, Mark. Seriously." I offered Mark a coffee. "Thank you so much for coming, Mark. We really appreciate it." He took the mug, his fingers brushing mine. It was a brief, innocent contact, but for some reason it sent a little shiver down my spine. I chalked it up to moving stress and the sheer exhaustion of the past few weeks. The first few hours were a blur of lifting, carrying, and maneuvering boxes through doorways. Mark was a powerhouse, effortlessly hoisting heavy items that Tom and I struggled with. He was also incredibly organized, efficiently packing the truck to maximize space. I found myself watching him, admiring his strength and his quiet competence. There was a rhythm to our work. Tom would direct, I'd label boxes and offer encouragement, and more coffee. And Mark would do the heavy lifting. We worked in comfortable silence, punctuated by the occasional grunt or the scrape of cardboard on wood. But as the morning wore on, something shifted. A subtle tension, almost imperceptible, began to weave its way into the atmosphere. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe it was the intimacy of working so closely together, but I started to notice things I hadn't before. The way Mark's brow furrowed in concentration, the way his muscles flexed beneath his t-shirt, the way his eyes, a deep, warm brown, seemed to linger on me for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. I caught myself looking at him too, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something that made my heart beat a little faster. Around lunchtime, Tom went to pick up sandwiches. Mark and I were left alone in the house, surrounded by the remnants of our life. The silence felt different now, heavier, charged with an unspoken energy. He leaned against a stack of boxes, wiping sweat from his brow. "You okay, Sarah?" he asked, using my name. "You look tired." "I am," I admitted, sinking onto a nearby chair. "But we're getting there." "Thanks to you." He smiled, that easy, genuine smile that always made me feel seen. "Glad to help. You and Tom have always been good to me." We just sat there for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words. The sun streamed through the dusty windows, illuminating the bare walls and the scattered debris. The house felt empty, hollow. Then he said something that surprised me, something that cracked open a door I didn't even know was there. "You know," he said softly, his eyes meeting mine, "Sarah was always so fond of you. She always said you were one of the kindest people she knew." And in that moment, something shifted. The grief I'd felt for Sarah's passing, the loneliness I'd been carrying around for years, and this strange, unexpected connection with Mark. It all coalesced into a single, powerful emotion. I just looked at him, unable to speak. He stepped closer, his eyes filled with a warmth that both comforted and unnerved me. "I miss her," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I miss her so much." And then, before I could say anything, before I could even think, he reached out and took my hand. His hand was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked hard. My own hand, suddenly aware of its age spots and slightly trembling skin, felt small and fragile in his. The contact wasn't overtly sexual, but it was electric. A jolt of something I hadn't felt in years, a spark that ignited a dormant part of me. He just held my hand, his thumb gently stroking my skin. We stood there, frozen in time, surrounded by the ghosts of our past and the uncertainty of our future. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant sounds of traffic and the frantic chirping of birds outside the window. "Mark?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice catching in my throat. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a vulnerability I hadn't expected. "I know," he said softly. "I shouldn't. I just—" He trailed off, searching for the right words. He didn't need to say anything. I understood. We both understood. The shared grief, the unspoken loneliness, the yearning for connection. It was all there, hanging in the air between us. He released my hand, slowly, reluctantly. The absence of his touch left a strange emptiness, a longing for something I couldn't quite name. "Tom will be back soon," I said, stating the obvious. "Yeah," he replied, stepping back. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, looking suddenly flustered. I should get back to work." We spent the rest of the afternoon avoiding each other's gaze. The easy camaraderie that had characterized the morning was gone, replaced by a strained politeness. The lifting and carrying continued, but the rhythm was broken, the silence now uncomfortable. Tom, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around him, remained his usual jovial self. He told stories, cracked jokes, and generally kept the mood light. I tried to reciprocate, but my heart wasn't in it. I felt like I was living in a movie, watching myself from the outside, wondering how I'd gotten here. By late afternoon, the truck was packed and the house was empty. Stripped bare, it felt like a shell of its former self, a repository of memories that were now being carted off to a new location. We all stood on the porch, surveying the scene. The setting sun cast long shadows across the lawn, painting the world in hues of orange and gold. "Well," Tom said, clapping his hands together. "That's that. Thanks again, Mark. I owe you one." Mark smiled, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. "Anytime, Tom. Glad to help." He turned to me, and for a brief moment, his gaze locked with mine. There was a silent message there, a question, a plea, a promise. I couldn't decipher it, but I felt its weight, its significance. "Thank you, Mark," I said, my voice barely audible. "For everything." He nodded, then climbed into his truck. With a wave, he drove off, leaving us standing on the empty porch. The drive to the new apartment was a blur. Tom chattered on about the new neighborhood, the local restaurants, and the exciting possibilities that lay ahead. I nodded and smiled, but my mind was miles away, replaying the events of the day, trying to make sense of what had happened. The apartment was small, but bright and airy. It had a view of the city skyline, a welcome change from the suburban landscape we were used to. But as I looked around at the unpacked boxes, the unfamiliar furniture, and the sterile white walls, I felt a pang of loneliness. That night, after Tom had fallen asleep, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in my mind, the weight of them pressing down on me. Mark's hand in mine, his words about Sarah, the unspoken longing in his eyes. What did it all mean? Was it just a fleeting moment of weakness, a temporary lapse in judgment fueled by grief and exhaustion? Or was it something more, something deeper? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that something had shifted within me. Something had awakened. I knew I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. I couldn't just sweep it under the rug and pretend that everything was fine. The next morning, I woke up with a resolve. I needed to talk to Mark. I needed to understand what had happened, what it meant, and where we went from here. But how could I do that without hurting Tom? Without betraying his trust? That was the question that haunted me for the next few days, a question that I didn't have an answer to, a question that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about myself, my marriage, and my life. I spent the next few days unpacking, trying to create a sense of normalcy in our new home. Tom, oblivious to my inner turmoil, was happy and excited about the move. He explored the neighborhood, made friends with the doorman, and spent hours rearranging his collection of vintage tools. I tried to be present, to engage with him, but my mind kept drifting back to Mark. I found myself checking my phone constantly, hoping for a text or a call. I even drove by his house once, just to see if his truck was there. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was playing with fire. But I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to him, to the possibility of something more, like a moth to a flame. Finally, after 3 days of agonizing indecision, I made up my mind. I had to talk to him. I had to know. I waited until Tom was out running errands. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Mark's number. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened to the ringing. Each ring felt like an eternity. Finally, he answered. "Hello." His voice was hesitant, cautious. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling. "It's Sarah." There was a long pause. "Sarah," he said softly. "I was wondering if I'd hear from you." "Mark," I repeated, my voice a little steadier this time. I need to talk to you." Another long pause. I could practically feel the weight of his silence on the other end of the line. "I think that's a good idea," he finally said, his voice low and serious. "When and where? Can you meet me at the park?" I suggested, thinking of the small, secluded park a few blocks from our old house. "The one by the creek?" "The creek," he echoed, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "Yeah, I know it. How about noon?" "Noon," I agreed. "I'll see you then." I hung up the phone, my heart still pounding, but with a sense of relief. At least I was doing something. At least I was taking control of the situation. The hours leading up to noon crawled by. I paced the apartment, cleaned obsessively, and tried to distract myself with a book, but my mind was a whirlwind of anxiety and anticipation. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, imagining all the possible outcomes. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if he regretted holding my hand? What if he thought I was crazy? And even if he did feel something, what then? Was I really willing to risk my marriage for a chance at something new? The questions swirled around me, threatening to drown me in doubt. But beneath the anxiety, there was a flicker of excitement, a spark of hope that wouldn't be extinguished. Finally, the clock struck noon. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and headed out the door. The park was just as I remembered it, a small oasis of green in the middle of the bustling city. The creek gurgled merrily as it wound its way through the trees, a familiar soundtrack to my childhood memories. I spotted Mark sitting on a bench near the water, his back to me. He was wearing the same faded blue t-shirt and jeans he'd worn on moving day. He looked older, more weathered, but still undeniably attractive. I walked towards him, my footsteps muffled by the soft grass. As I got closer, he turned and saw me. His eyes widened slightly, and a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Sarah," he said, standing up. "Thanks for coming." "Thank you for meeting me," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of our shared history and the uncertainty of our future. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "what did you want to talk about?" I took a deep breath. "About what happened on moving day," I said, my voice trembling slightly. About the way we both felt." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about it too," he said. "A lot." I don't know what to say," I stammered. "I'm married, Mark. I love Tom. But you felt something," he finished for me. "And so did I." I looked down at my hands, ashamed. "I didn't mean for it to happen," I said. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." He reached out and gently took my hand. His touch was warm and reassuring. "I know," he said. "Neither did I." We sat down on the bench, side by side, our hands still clasped together. The creek gurgled beside us, a constant reminder of the passage of time. "I miss Sarah," he said softly, his voice filled with grief. "I miss her every day. And being around you, seeing your kindness, your strength. It reminded me of her." "I miss her too," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "She was a wonderful woman." We sat in silence for a moment, sharing our grief, our memories of Sarah. It was a strange, intimate connection, born out of loss and longing. "But it's more than that, isn't it?" I finally said, breaking the silence. "It's not just about Sarah." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and hope. "No," he said, "it's not. I'd always been drawn to you, Sarah, even when Sarah was alive. You have this light about you, this warmth, this kindness. I've always admired it." I was stunned. I had no idea he felt that way. I don't know what to say," I stammered. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know." He paused, then took a deep breath. "Look," he said, "I'm not trying to break up your marriage. I respect Tom too much, but I couldn't just pretend that nothing happened. I needed to be honest with you and with myself." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. "Thank you," I said, "for being honest." We sat in silence for a long time, our hands still clasped together. The creek gurgled beside us, a constant reminder of the complexities of life, of love, and of loss. Finally, I spoke. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and resignation. "I don't know," he said. "That's up to you." He squeezed my hand gently, then released it. He stood up and walked over to the edge of the creek, staring into the water. "I'm not going to tell you to leave Tom," he said, his back to me. "I wouldn't do that to him, and I wouldn't do that to you. You need to decide what's best for you, what's going to make you happy." He turned back to me, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "But I want you to know that I'm here," he said. "If you ever need me, if you ever decide that you want something more, I'll be here." He paused, then added softly, "I'll always be here." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me sitting on the bench, alone with my thoughts and my emotions. The weight of the decision pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. What was I going to do? Could I ignore what happened, bury my feelings, and pretend that everything was fine? Or was I brave enough to risk everything for a chance at something new? The answer, I knew, lay within me, but finding it wouldn't be easy. The walk back to the apartment was a daze. The city noises, usually a comforting hum, felt abrasive and intrusive. My mind was a battlefield torn between loyalty and desire, between the familiar comfort of my marriage and the tantalizing allure of the unknown. I replayed Mark's words over and over. "I'll be here." The simplicity of that promise, the quiet strength behind it, resonated deep within me. It wasn't a demand or even a suggestion, but a simple statement of fact. A lifeline, perhaps. When I got back to the apartment, Tom was there, puttering around in the kitchen. He looked up as I walked in, his face lighting up with a smile. "Hey, honey," he said. "How was your walk?" I forced a smile. "It was nice," I replied. "Just what I needed." He didn't seem to notice my hesitation, my strained tone. He launched into a story about a new recipe he was trying, his enthusiasm infectious. I listened, nodding and making the appropriate responses, but my mind was elsewhere. That evening, as we sat down to dinner, the silence felt different. It wasn't the comfortable silence of a couple who had shared years of their lives together, but a strained, uneasy silence filled with unspoken questions and hidden anxieties. I tried to engage Tom in conversation, but my attempts felt forced and unnatural. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living a lie, that I was betraying him simply by being near him. After dinner, I excused myself and went to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, with this secret hanging between us. I had to make a decision. But how could I choose between two men who both meant so much to me? Tom walked into the bedroom, sensing my distress. He sat down beside me and took my hand. "What's wrong, honey?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "You've been acting strange all day." I looked at him, at his kind, familiar face, and the tears started to flow. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I don't know what to do," I sobbed. "I'm so confused." He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. "It's okay," he said softly. "You can tell me anything." And so I did. I told him everything. About the move, about the loneliness, about Sarah's passing, about Mark, about the hand-holding, about the conversation in the park. I poured out my heart, confessing my confusion, my guilt, and my conflicting emotions. Tom listened patiently, without interrupting, without judging. When I was finished, he held me tighter. "I understand," he said quietly. "I can see how you'd be confused. It's been a tough time for both of us." He paused, then added, "I know I haven't been the most attentive husband lately. I've been so focused on the move in my collections that I haven't been paying attention to your needs." His words were like a balm to my wounded soul. He wasn't angry, he wasn't accusatory, he was understanding and compassionate. "I love you, Sarah," he said. "I don't want to lose you, but I also want you to be happy. If you think that you'd be happier with Mark then I won't stand in your way." His words were like a knife to my heart. The thought of leaving him, of hurting him, was unbearable. "I don't want to leave you, Tom," I said, my voice choked with tears. "I love you too, but I don't know if I can just forget what happened. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were." He took my face in his hands and looked me in the eyes. "Then don't," he said. "Don't try to forget. Acknowledge what happened, learn from it, and move forward. We can work through this, Sarah. We can find a way to make our marriage stronger, more meaningful." His words gave me hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could survive this. Maybe we could rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty and understanding. I spent the next few weeks in intense self-reflection. I thought about what I wanted, what I needed, and what I was willing to sacrifice. I talked to Tom openly and honestly about my feelings, my fears, and my desires. We decided to try couples therapy. It was difficult, painful at times, but it helped us to communicate more effectively and to understand each other's needs. I also decided to talk to Mark. I met him at the park again, the place where it all began. "I've made a decision," I said, my voice clear and steady. He looked at me, his eyes filled with anticipation. "And I'm staying with Tom," I said. "I love him, and I believe that we can make our marriage work. But I also want to be honest with you. I value your friendship, Mark, and I don't want to lose that." He nodded slowly, his face a mixture of disappointment and understanding. "I understand," he said. "I respect your decision, and I appreciate you being honest with me. We agreed to remain friends, but to maintain a certain distance. We wouldn't spend time alone together, and we would be careful not to cross any boundaries." It wasn't easy. There were moments of temptation, moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I had made the right decision. But I stayed committed to my marriage, to working on our relationship, and to building a future with Tom. Slowly, gradually, our marriage began to heal. We rediscovered the love and passion that had been buried beneath years of routine and complacency. We learned to communicate more effectively, to appreciate each other's strengths, and to forgive each other's weaknesses. We even started going antiquing again, something Sarah and I used to enjoy. It was a way of honoring her memory and of celebrating the bond that we had shared. Looking back, I realized that the move, the boxes, and the unexpected connection with Mark were all catalysts for change. They forced me to confront my own desires, my own insecurities, and my own mortality. They taught me the importance of honesty, communication, and forgiveness. Our marriage isn't perfect. We still have our struggles, our disagreements, and our moments of doubt. But we are stronger now, more resilient, and more deeply connected than ever before. And as for Mark, he remains a part of our lives, a friend, a reminder of the challenges we have overcome and the choices we have made. He eventually found love again, a kind woman who shared his passion for gardening and his quiet appreciation for the simple things in life. I was happy for him. He deserved to find happiness again. Life is full of surprises, of unexpected turns, and of difficult choices. But it is through these challenges that we grow, that we learn, and that we discover the true meaning of love and commitment. So, that's my story. It's not a fairy tale, and it doesn't have a perfect ending, but it's real, it's honest, and it's a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories.